Welcome to Beyond Time Signatures. Today with us we have Joe Calderone from Arch Echo. Welcome, Joe. Welcome to the podcast.
Hello, everyone. Happy to be here.
How are you doing today?
I'm good. I had a pretty normal day. Went grocery shopping, ran some errands, things like that. Yeah, pretty chill one. But
Awesome, man. Sweet.
yeah.
I just woke up like 2 hours ago.
Oh yeah, yeah. For the people out there, there's like a almost 12-hour time difference, I think, or
Yeah,
13 or
10
something.
hours.
So
Yeah, something like that.
yeah,
But yeah, man, I'm very excited to have you on the podcast, and I can't wait to get into like the questions. So, like, firstly, I just want to start by asking you, like, what was your first memory with music?
that's a good question. All right. Maybe not exactly that, but I remember as a kid, I was like maybe in like third or fourth grade or something, and I was telling my dad like I wanted to play like violin or viola at like the school
Okay.
orchestra, and but before that I had exhibited no musical talent or anything. I never really played anything. My dad's just like, you don't want to do that. You'll break those, you know. So I was a breaker of things. So didn't do that for a while, but then a few years later, I had a friend next door who was learning guitar or played guitar. I was learning guitar a little bit at the time too. And then one day he's like, hey, if you get a bass, you can be in the band. So uh, I got a
Okay.
bass the next day. And that was sort of the start of that. But earliest music memories, I feel like goes back to video games for me. So it's going to be things like just playing The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of
Zelda.
Time, for example. Yeah, just like really core in there, like that music ingrained before I even realized it was ingraining in me. So,
Dude, that's really awesome. I'm glad that I kind of guessed that it probably would be Mario 64 or Zelda for you,
uh,
but I'm yeah, cuz like the interesting thing like I hope like all the video game nerds know this, but due to certain constraints with video game music, like you were only allowed to use 8 bits for making the music, so there were only a few available notes, and one of the
right.
note in the Ocarina of Time themes happened to be a flat 6. So that's why we have that movement of like Picardy third or
Yeah,
uh
there you
yeah,
go.
sorry, not flat 6, but like the 6 major chord.
Uh,
Yeah, so
wow.
yeah. And how did you like, okay, so you just mentioned like you started with your next door friend on the bass. So from their point on, like, what were the bands you came across and what were the bands you initially loved?
Yeah. So, when I first started playing, the first song I played a bass line to, even though it was on a electric guitar, because it was like the day before I got a bass. We were playing "Smells Like Teen Spirit" by Nirvana. They were just like, "Oh, this bass line's
Nice.
really easy. You just do these four notes," and I'm like, "Okay." And it's pretty much just that still. But after that, I was into a lot of classic rock. So bands like AC/DC were I was really into, and like they were also just really easy to learn on bass too, which helped make it fun because it's like a lot of AC/DC songs. You're riding one note and just chugging along with eighth notes for 4 minutes. So it's like in a way it was like great ear training for me just being a kid who doesn't know anything because I'm listening and trying to find the note and it's like, oh, this song is in A and it stays on A for most of the song and like I can do that and that's like very beginning ear training there. Led Zeppelin was a big one. Was into Pink Floyd, and then I got into Rush. And once I got into Rush, that's when things like really opened up because I got really into Rush because I was like, I didn't realize bass could do all that stuff that Geddy Lee was doing. So that really took my interest there. Really helped improve my ear as I learned songs from them and stuff. And yeah, for me, Rush, the Red Hot Chili Peppers is another really big one. And then like Jaco Pastorius, like his solo album and like some of the Weather Report stuff are just like three groups that really helped expand what I thought bass could be.
Yeah. Dude, that's awesome. Like, my next, like, I wanted to ask you about Rush. That, uh, do you recollect certain songs that like opened your horizon with Rush, and just as a band in general, like, what were the things you picked up from Rush as far as groove and bass lines are concerned?
Yeah, so I distinctly remember Well, I had a friend who burned me like a Rush mixtape of songs that were downloaded from LimeWire or something like that, right? So it was like, you know, the best of Rush, but downloaded from LimeWire. And I was just sitting on like the school bus one day, and I'm listening to Spirit of Radio. And then one day I just realized, because I got some headphones in, that in the intro, it's not, I thought like the intro was just sort of a drum solo at first. And then with the headphones, I'm like, oh, the bass is playing the notes with the drum fills, like exactly. And that was like, that like blew my mind. So that's where,
Nice.
yeah, I really got interested in them. And then, yeah, I mean, a lot of stuff in that vein. Like there's a lot of Rush songs where Neil will do some crazy fill and the bass matches it. And like, you don't see that in a ton of music anywhere. So I always love that. Power Windows is another album where just like the bass and drums are so locked in where, you know, if Neil's doing some certain fill, the bass is matching it with notes on their end. And it's a really cool thing. It's not just like three people separately jamming, you know, or like playing
Right.
what they think might be cool, but it's like really locked in. So that's sort of an approach I took. Even today is just like following drum fills and, you know, trying to write something that can complement it or can sit under it, but in like a really nice way versus just like ignoring it, you know, or not paying too much attention to stuff like that. Cause like you got to be on with the groove and all that, but I don't think many people think about like the fills and stuff too.
Yeah, I guess so. Especially like people coming from genres like prog, where everything is super tight and super technical, that the flair of like, uh, classic rock, or I would say like even bands like Rush, like, I mean, obviously, like Harsh Echo is super awesome that way, where you pick your moments and you do things that are not super in, I would say, sync per se
Uh,
with the kick drum and the guitars, as far as like accents are concerned. So that's really awesome. I have only had like a little bit of listening experience with Rush. So if you were to recommend me an album, or anyone watching an album, that if you want to get into Rush, this is the album they should listen to, what would that album be?
I think most people would probably say Moving Pictures is the one. It's just a really solid album. Really good example of sort of what Rush does. I personally love the Signals album, but it's a little
Okay.
synthier, a little slower. But I love it. I think the songwriting on it's like really great and stuff like that. But Moving Pictures for sure. And then if you're into like 80s sounds, Power Windows is a really good one because it's just like
Okay, gotcha.
sort of 80s pop production, but like on top of Rush, which is super fun. And I think that album's super solid too.
Yeah, I remember watching one of your videos of, bassist ranks all the Rush studio albums. And I was like, and very, very soon after that, Dante Frizzello from Steve Vai's band was on the podcast, and he is a big Rush fan too.
Oh,
So
nice.
that's, yeah, so that's when, like, because I dig some Russian Genesis earlier, but I was like, okay, probably should start. If these guys are super keen on it, then there is probably some substance, like great substance to it. So yeah, man, that's really cool. I'll definitely check those albums out. And yeah, and did you happen to go to university for music, or
I
was
went
it
to
something
Berkeley.
that,
Yeah.
bruh,
So
I
that's where I
assume
met
that's
most
where
of the
you.
Archeco guys as well. Yeah.
Okay, okay, okay. That's really awesome. And did it happen, like, naturally, or like, you how did our check happen?
Yeah, it was pretty natural, I think. I mean, yeah, we had all just graduated pretty much. So the four of us who went there were me, Joey, Adam Raffwitz, and Adam Bentley. We had all graduated like the year prior or like that summer, pretty much. And what actually happened was at first Joey and Adam Raffwitz were doing this like. Oh, let me get this right. I think it was Joey's project both times. He was a music production engineering major, and he had to produce an EP. And I think he had to do that twice. I don't know exactly why, but so for one of them, he produced an EP with Adam Raffowitz,
Okay.
which had Bloom on it, pretty much like an early version of Bloom that he wrote. And then
Whoa.
Yeah, and then Joey had to do his own EP, I guess, for the project or some project. I don't
Dissertation.
remember, but yeah, he had to write some songs, and that became a Color Wheel and Spark. He wrote both of those just as like a piano jam. So that music was sort of existing at the time. I think during that sort of school project, Joey realized it was really fun working with Adam Rathwitz and writing with him to make stuff. So they got together in like the summer of 2016 after we had all graduated and all that, and we're just experimenting, writing stuff, and they wrote some really whack stuff together. Like I think the first song that happened might have been Earthshine, and then Hip
Uh,
Dipper was like soon after that, and it was just like, yeah, just these sounds that I feel like I have not heard before in progressive metal. So it was super fun, and they were showing me stuff like along the way, and I had played bass on both of their EPs before that as well, so I was like, hey, I want to play bass on this stuff, you know? And then,
that's so
yeah,
cool,
it
man.
just sort of happened from there pretty much. We put out the
And
album in 2017 and didn't know if anyone would listen to it. It was just like, we were just happy with it. So it was a cool project.
yeah, I mean that's really awesome to know. And at what point did you guys met Richie and included him as a part of? Because I feel like he's such a strong personality for the band, not just as a drummer but in general. Because I see him like in a way handling social media, and he does it really well for
Hmm.
Arch Echo. He has a
Yeah.
great command. So I'm just curious, like, at what point did you guys met Richie?
Yeah. That was towards the end of 2016. Cause me, Adam, Joey, I think at a later point, we got Adam Bentley involved because he was like, Joey's good at mixing, but at the time we were like, Adam Bentley's really good at mixing, like just from the stuff that he did at college. He had that sort of periphery style pretty down at the time, which was like super cool. So we wanted him involved, and also he's a great rhythm guitarist too. And yeah, we were asking like who should play drums, and I think Joey sent like a few people that we went to Berkeley with of like potential people that could drum on this project, and I was just like, I'd watch a video and it's just like, I don't know. I don't know if I'm feeling it. And Adam Bentley mentioned that he had just done a session because he had been living in Nashville after
Okay.
graduating. He had just done a session where Richie was the drummer, and he was like, I should show you some of his stuff, and like maybe we can get on a call or something. And sends me his YouTube page, sends me Richie's YouTube page, and he's got some Mars Volta covers on there, and I was like, "Oh hell yes, yeah, this is the dude just like slamming out some Thomas Pridgeton." So that's when I was like, "No, he's the guy." So
That's so like, yeah, I mean, probably like a match made sort of a thing. That's really awesome to hear. And yeah, I'm glad you guys got along. How does general or like a very standard Arch Echo writing session look like right now, and how it used to be earlier in the day? Because I feel like as a band matures, as even you guys mature as musicians, a lot of things change, right? So like, I'm just
mhm.
curious, like, how have things evolved for a writing session?
Yeah, that's the thing. A standard writing session, I have no idea. So in the beginning, it was a lot of Joey and Adam Raffwitz getting together. Either one would fly to one person's place or the other way around and write some stuff, like having at least two people in the room or something like that. Uh, we did a bit of that for the second album as well, but there was one 2 week session we did where we were all together in Nashville. That was super cool. There was another session later on in the year where Joey and Adam Raffwitz got started, and I flew up in the middle of it and got to participate with that too. I think that session we did Stella and Box of Fun, which was cool. And then COVID hit, and that kind of like messed everything up. Where a lot of we had somehow gotten the majority of story one written before the pandemic stuff happened. So that was a few sessions between Joey and Adam, pretty much, that helped to write like To the Moon and Leonessa. I don't even remember when Strut was written, but that happened at some point. And then yeah, so COVID came in, sort of messed some things up, which meant for a lot of the final pitch writing sessions, it was a lot of you know, writing a riff on your own, sending it into the group chat, and then like maybe it gets developed upon later and we might do some production over Zoom or something, but it's like way less fun in
Yeah,
that
I can
regard.
imagine.
And just ended up being a lot harder to put together too, I think, in the end, because it took us way longer to sort of have that album out than we wanted. So uh, the current day, at least our latest writing trip, we had one back in November for our next release, which we haven't like announced yet or anything, but I wanted to make sure that, you know, we weren't dealing with Zoom. We were in a spot somewhere and just like having fun doing music. Cause I feel like the final pitch writing ended up just being really stressful because it was a lot of like, this album has to get done and not a lot of like fun making an album, if that makes sense.
I
So
hear you. Yeah.
yeah, so we got together in Nashville. Two of the guys already live in Nashville. So the other three of us flew out for about like 9 days or something like that. And it was great. Like I didn't know if we would get anything done, but I just wanted us to go somewhere. Maybe we get a song done in that week and eat some barbecue and just like enjoy doing music stuff again, like enjoy writing again versus having the stress of the writing and production pipeline and all that. And we ended up getting 3 songs done in that week, which is like a world record for Arch Echo. So
Dude,
hopefully we'll do more
lovely.
of
Like,
that in the future. Yeah.
yeah. So I have 2 questions. First question is like, like I've heard so much about Nashville sessions and stuff. So like, do you like for Arch Echo were those kind of sessions like on a similar wavelength, or was it like your own complete different ballpark of Nashville sessions?
I don't know how a lot of the other Nashville sessions go. So here's what we did. We didn't rent a studio or anything. We literally rented an Airbnb and
Oh,
just
okay.
posted up there for a week. And like we set up a desk with a computer, some monitors, keyboard. We had our guitars, and then we just got jamming there. And it was like, I guess pretty nice because we didn't have to like travel anywhere to go write for the day or anything. Like we just wake up, living room has this sort of studio built inside of it, and then yeah, we just do stuff from there. So
Nice.
I
That's
don't know
way
if
more
other people do
convenient.
that, but I would recommend it. I think it was super fun.
Yeah. I mean, like you guys have a solid foundation with like, production, and even Adam Bentley, like as a mix engineer. So
Yeah.
I'm guess like you guys have sorted that way. What I had in mind was like, going to a studio, renting like,
Hmm.
the studio, and probably even a producer maybe to like
Right.
just, or like a recording engineer. That's what I had in mind for Nashville. But this is
Uh,
like, this is
yeah,
way more
that's
chill. This is way
that.
more laid back and
Right.
more like, bunch of friends just getting together and like, writing bangers.
Yeah, that's probably what a lot of groups do, I guess. But we really only rent studios to record drums, and that's literally just to have a
Fair enough.
space, like a good space to record those drums in. That's like the only thing we really need it for. Because like I'm recording bass into an interface, you know, Adam is using an Axe Effects, Joey has 10,000 keyboard plugins that he's going to use, so and all that's MIDI. So like we don't need a studio to process these sounds. And yeah, a lot of us are just so versed in production already that we can get stuff going for the most part. So for these writing sessions, it's really just where we make a demo, which is like 90% of what the final song will be pretty much. And then we'll rent a studio for actual drum tracking and then, give it that last 10% finishing touch uh, once we go into tracking for everyone else as well.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Yeah, that's sounds like very streamlined way of working. And like I'm very curious because I've never worked with a band. So how do you guys as a collective make songwriting decisions?
Vibes. Does it pass the neck test when you listen? Are you like this or are you like confused? So uh, you just try stuff. You hope it works. I think one of the latest songs we wrote, Joey had just loaded up some like wacky synth bass patch that we would have never used anything like it before and wrote like a bass line with it. And then we just built something on top of it. And we're just like, yeah, this is like different, but it's awesome. So sometimes it's like that. And then other times you're writing and you're like, this is actually just Bloom again. And then you got to start over, So
Yeah, and with instrumental music, it's like if you're writing in the same key, you can't help but to like reference yourself with
yeah,
certain motifs of yours, right? So like,
yeah, exactly.
yeah, you gotta. How often do you have to like talk one of your bandmates out of like if they're like, one day they're like, oh, this is fine. The next day they're like, oh man, I'm not feeling it that much today. So like, how do you? But you guys know that that's fine. That's very awesome. So how do you talk someone out of that phase?
Yeah, I don't know if it happens too much where we write something and then like the next day there's like, you know what? I don't know about that. I guess when we originally wrote immediate results, it had an entirely different chorus section. It was in
Oh, okay.
9/8 for some reason, or like 9/4. It was like something dumb. I was like, why is there this extra beat? I think we were all kind of like feeling slightly off about it while it was happening, but we were just like producing it to see where it goes. And then the next day we were like, all just sort of collectively like, this is kind of dumb.
I see. I see. Yeah, man, that sounds like a very chill way of working, and I love that. I love that. Um, Speaking of bass, like I program my bass sadly because I don't know how to play bass, and I unfortunately don't know people in my vicinity whom I can like collaborate with. So for the longest time, like a bass buffoon myself, what I would do is like whenever I have a riff, I would start by first copying the guitar riff root with the root or
Uh-huh.
probably with the fifth, like having it with the same, and then I'll probably like add some accents or something like that. But even after that it's just me trying to copy the guitars, right? So
Mm-hmm.
like I'm sure like whenever certain bass students come in who only like play to songs that work on root notes or something like that, like how do you explain them, or how do you broaden their horizons to like making sure that bass is its own instrument that might be contrasting in certain parts, but it is always cohesive and like has a solid groove to it, or things like that. How do you expand someone's horizon from just going from root fifth sort of
Mm-hmm.
like bass lines to something more intricate?
Yeah. I mean, there's like I guess a lot of music theory involved, right? Like if you don't know that you can, you know, hit that major seven or the nine on that chord as well, then you might not go for it and you'll just stick with the root and fifth, for example. So I think just having familiarity with music theory, with your scales and things like that, and like what notes work in this key goes a long way. And then as far as like metal bass goes, with are we just doubling the guitar line or are we doing something else? That's always a tricky question with bass. I try not to just like be a guitarist on bass where I am just playing the guitar line, for example. My focus usually is on the drums first, and there's a lot of synth bass in our music too that'll happen where like Joey's playing a line on the keyboard. If he's doing that, in that case, I sort of have to stay locked in with that. Otherwise, we'll have this sort of low end mess going on in our mix. You don't want
I
that.
see. I
But
see.
when you're talking just bass and guitar, you do have a bit more room to sort of do different things. So I'm always locked in on like uh, bass drum and snare, for example, to figure out my rhythm or where I'm putting notes, and then trying to follow that versus like trying to hit every run on a guitar. Uh, and then sometimes just looking for like counter melodies or harmonies to what the guitar is doing, just to make it a little different. There, I think is fun as well.
I see. I see. And how often do you like, get frustrated when you listen to like, music where okay, this is program based and this is not doing much to it?
I mean, for example, I love Periphery One, but like, yeah, it's just the bass is just the guitar, and I don't like that approach, but I still love that album. So, and I think like some of the later stuff with Nolly is actually a really good uh, thing to check out too. If you're like a bassist, for example, and you check out the stems of the guitar versus the bass, check out where Nolly is like following the guitar, where he's just like, maybe you've got a multi-note shreddy line on the guitar, but you're just playing that same rhythm but on one note on bass, for example, to just keep things locked in. He does a lot of good just sort of following the guitar sometimes and then staying out of the way other times. So it's always a nice one to check out.
I see. Yeah, man. Are there any other cool bass related concepts that musicians across all board should be aware while crafting bass lines, or while just like, dealing with bass in general?
Yeah, I mean, just like the kick drum is king with that. Like you want your notes to sort of hit when that kick drum hits, and I
Right.
try not to really play notes when there isn't kick drum, because it's just you can do it in certain circumstances, like for solos and things like that. But if you really want stuff to groove, like you want your notes like in there on those hits, and I'll use kick, snare. If there's some toms thrown in, I'll jump in on those too. But I like to sort of hide my notes under those shells as well, just for like extra groove.
I see. So like instead of focusing on guitars, like, if people started approaching it more as like a complementary thing for drums, and then comes the guitars, I mean, I
Yeah,
think
and
you.
it gets kind of gray too, because like with some progressive metal riffs, your drums, bass, and guitar are all doing the same thing. For example, like especially some gentler stuff. But yeah, just like seeing where you can vary in those things, like your drums can do less than the guitar, your bass can follow those drums, and you can have a cool groove going there.
I see. And also has to do with like, if let's just say if it's a riff and it's quite intricate and quite fast, or like a bound like string skipping riff or something on a guitar, then having to copy that might just muddy it up. So like probably doing the opposite of that, and maybe vice versa
Right.
for a simple guitar part too. So that there's some contrast there, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
I see. I see. I mean, I was like quite stuck honestly for the last 2 days because I'm working on an EP right now, and I was
Uh
like,
huh.
I wish I knew how to play bass. And I mean, I'm trying to answer some of my personal questions through you, because
Yeah.
now that you've told me that, focus on drums before the guitars, I think that just that one sentence is really helpful, and I'm gonna try to like work
Cool.
on it. So yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah. You got it.
Is there a way, like after having written so many songs, is there a way you have figured out for yourself that in a song, this is where I'm going to pick my moments? Or like alternate question could be like, how do you decide when to pick your moments in a song?
Yeah, it's a good one too. I feel like for a while I've just been trying to like shove my moments in there, just like if there's an empty space, I'm like, oh, there should be some cool bass stuff here. But yeah, I think picking them, like knowing not when to play, is one of the best things you can learn as a bassist. So
I
it's
see.
all about, that silence is what sort of makes what you are doing more powerful. So it's at the end of the day, it becomes about complementing the song and what it needs. And if I can play out for a little section and catch a drum fill or something, that's cool. But for the most part, especially with our music, it's a lot of like following the rhythm guitars, which are also maybe following the synth bass while Adam Rafwitz is shredding or something. So because there's a lot of notes going on at many times. So there are times when we don't need a fourth person adding extra notes.
I
But then
hear
there's
you. Yeah,
sometimes where we're adding all those notes, like red letter or something like that.
yeah, man. Yeah, that sounds, yeah, that I get what you're trying to say. And um, have there been any songs where, like, that really stuck out to you, where, you had a solid idea for a bass and it worked out flawlessly or as intended or even better than intended?
um,
Or like, alternate question could be, what are your favorite bass parts to play live?
yeah. Oh man, I'm just like going through all of our songs in my head now. I feel like Spark had some cool stuff on bass.
Okay.
Like
Okay.
there were just some fills in there that like I literally thought of in my head, like this might be cool, and I went to go play it, and I was like, oh yeah, that's fun. So that one for sure. Plus, it opens up in the solo section, which is just nice. So there's a lot of moments, especially in some of the earlier stuff, where uh, there's like room for improvisation. So Richie loves to not play the same stuff every night, which is great. So that keeps me on my toes and checking in on what he's doing and locking in with that. So Spark is always a fun one because that solo section can just be like really open there, and it's never really like exactly the same as the album, which is cool.
Yeah, I mean, I love when bands spice things up in their live performances. I had a chance to see you guys back in 2023 December NH7 Weekender,
Nice. Yeah,
and
that was a lot of
yeah,
fun.
yeah, I was there. I mean, I know, like, there were certain mishaps that happened with the guitars and stuff, where it was due to Adam's AirTag that you were able to finally get a
Oh no, that
hand.
was my AirTag.
Oh, was it? Oh, dude,
Yeah.
it's wild. It's
So yeah,
yeah.
for the people who don't know, we checked. Uh, I checked a double case of bases. I'm pretty sure it was like two bases in one case. Adam checked his Axe effects and he carried his guitar on. I think he checked his Axe effects or something like that. And then Cameron checked another guitar as well. And we were flying from JFK to Mumbai, and we get off the plane, head to baggage claim. It's been about 30, 45 minutes. We're still waiting for our bags. Our driver's like, "Are you guys ready? I'm here." And we're like waiting for our bags. And so the quick backstory is I recently moved across the US like 2 years ago, and I had my car shipped to where I was moving so I wouldn't have to drive it. And there's dogs barking out there. And I put an AirTag in my car. And so I'm watching it go across the country, on my phone. And then one day it's like, in Nebraska, which is in like the middle of the country. And then one day I wake up and it's pinging in Montreal, Canada, which is extremely far away and not where it's supposed to be. And I was like, what? But it was just a bug, I guess. It wasn't in Montreal because it was later pinging through like Colorado. So it was on track. It like showed up normally. So I don't know what that was or why that happened. But so what happens next is I'm checking the location on my AirTag for my base at the airport here, and it's still just showing like its last known location, which was like at the JFK airport, which isn't a great sign, I guess, but maybe it just hasn't seen an iPhone yet or something. And then all of a sudden it pops up in New Delhi, which is like 700 miles away from where we were.
Yep.
And I was like,
Yep.
maybe it's that weird bug that my car AirTag had that one time, but it wasn't. It was actually just in New Delhi. So it was a crazy time trying to get that stuff back because the people working at the airport were like, "Oh yeah, no, it'll get to you," and we're like, I don't feel confident by your response. And their bags are. It's just like they kept track of all the bags with a number written on a clipboard. So I'm like, I don't think they knew that our bags were at this airport until we told them it was via the AirTag. And then, luckily our booking agent there was able to pull a ton of strings essentially and make a bunch of calls and get that
Subhash?
stuff where it needed to be. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Dude,
So he really saved the day there, just making that happen and having it essentially be overnighted to where we were. So that was
yeah.
incredible because I was like, that base is gone. Oh well.
Yeah, it's a nightmare for everyone, especially in, like, I think even for international flights, I've probably seen Rabea Masad like missing a guitar every month because he's always complaining about, like, Lufthansa like messing up his guitars in transit. And it's also like, especially like from what I have seen in India, like the fly airlines don't take responsibility, especially for music gear. They are like, oh, it's your fault, like we can't do much in it. and
uh,
and there was this certain company that recently made a clause that you cannot carry your guitars as hand baggage in planes. You'll have to specifically, or
wow.
else you will not be allowed on the flight. Because
That's
what happened
crazy.
was they were caught on tape, like, mishandling the instruments. So people were obviously very furious, because you can have the best case in the world, but you cannot always be like, the case is not meant to be thrown, it's meant to
Yeah.
be protected, right? So people were mad, and they were like, okay, we can't deal with people being mad, so we'll just remove the clause entirely.
Wow. Yeah.
That's so wild, man.
Yeah. So I don't think it was the airline's fault specifically. I think it was the people at JFK loaded our bags onto the wrong flight. I think that's how that went down. But yeah,
Way.
at the end of the day, it ended up in a different city in India, and we had to communicate with the airline and be like, "This is our bag. We need it here." Which like we were staying for the festival is like 3 hours away from Mumbai, so yeah, just
Yep.
a ton of logistic stuff to get it to where we were. But
Yeah. I can't imagine, like, like having lost your luggage in a totally different country. Like, have you
yeah,
had any other like borderline nightmares or like interesting stories while being on tour in US or anywhere else around the world?
there's
I would
there's
love
tons
to
of
hear.
interesting stories, but there's always something on tour. You know, it's just like you go on tour, and that's just when all the unknowns come and get you. So they wait, and then there was one tour where we had, I think, like 3 or 4 flat tires in a row somehow. I have
Yikes.
no idea. Just ran late for a ton of shows because of it. It was a lot of, yeah, just not fun. Uh, there was I mean, international flights in general are just, they can be rough on the jet lag. I remember last year we played in Japan, and we got in the night before, I think. But you know, if you're like, if you've just been, your body's just been swapped by 10 or 12 hours, you don't really sleep at night because it's like your normal daytime, so your rhythm's all off. And I just remember we were all in the green room about 2 hours before the show was supposed to start, and like, you know, we had just sound checked and all that, and you could tell like there was like a cloud came over the green room, and everyone at the same time was like, "Oh no, I am really jet lagged." So that ended up being like a hard show to get through just because we were like really tired. And probably similar with India. I remember I didn't sleep much before that festival show, mostly because I kept looking at the air tag on my phone to see like where my base was. And I heard they were going to like ship it out that night. And then I look a few hours into that night and it's still at the airport. And I'm like, why is it still there?
Yeah, I can't imagine, man. And and have you had any like, funny, I would say, logistical incidents on tour?
They're never funny at the time, but then you laugh about them later. Like there was one time, it was our first tour. Uh, we were going to stay at a friend's place that night. They just like offered their place for us to stay. So I just type, you know, I'm about to drive. I type the address into maps, which is like the number, the street, and then I heard roughly this place is about 45 minutes away. Map says it's about 45 minutes away. I say, cool, go. And I drive there. And then get there. It's like 2 a.m. It's dark. I can't find the house number that we're looking for. And it's because I apparently went to, I don't remember the street number, but I'll just say it was like, we were supposed to go to 423 Mansfield, Massachusetts, and I went to 423 Marlborough, Massachusetts, which is like
Ah,
somehow equidistant to where we were supposed to go. So they were both 45 minutes away from where we were driving from, but like far apart from each other. So I'm like, oh no, we're in the wrong place. So, you know, got to redo the map. I try and pull a K turn in this street that we're on, back over a rock, get stuck, and now we're trying to get the van off of this rock. I think we had to take a bunch of gear out of the van to like make it light enough to get back over the rock. This took like 20 or 30 minutes. It's like 3 a.m. now. And then we see like the neighbors turning on their lights, trying to figure out what's going on across the street. Why is there like this sketchy van out here? And we finally get out of the rock. We head down the street, and as we're heading down, we see a cop car heading our way. Like one of the neighbors called the cops to see what was going on, and we were like, "Oh, they're coming for us!" So we just kept going. But yeah, and then we went to bed at like 4:30 in the morning. So it wasn't that funny at the time, but now it's like really funny.
yeah, I mean, yeah, everything that could go wrong went wrong. And wow,
Yeah.
man. So, uh, how, like, I'm sure, like, touring has its own, like, perks and fun in its separate way, but it can also be stressful. So one of my friends is gonna go on a tour, on a US tour for 3 months. So from your
Wow.
experience, like, how do you, like, how can somebody stay sane during a tour?
Yeah, I mean, it depends what you're doing, I guess. Like, how big is the tour? Like, are they like on a bus for 3 months, or are they like in a van for 3 months?
Probably like a bus because it's a label back
Oh,
van.
cool.
So yeah.
That's definitely not as bad. But yeah, I guess you still gotta adjust because you're waking up in a different city every day and all that. And um, for me, it's just like trying to find routines where I can, uh, listening to music and things like that. Uh, I'm not like a super extroverted person, so a lot of times by the end of the night, I'm like just ready to go to bed when everyone else is like sort of pumped up and wants to like chat and all that stuff. So having like, if you're in a bus, for example, having a bunk that you can just escape into is pretty nice. I love to bring some video games with me as well, like my Switch or something like that. It's always fun to just have on tour and keep from getting too bored on some of the long drives. But if you have the time to do it, exploring where you are is just a great thing to do. A great way to spend some time. Go for a walk or even like a run or a hike or something like that. Richie has brought like a foldable bike on our last few tours, where he'll just like bike to a new coffee shop, for example, and like
Nice.
get to try the coffee there and get to see some stuff and move your body a little bit. And that's like something that keeps him sane. Uh, yeah. So it's if you're in like a van or something for 3 months, that sounds pretty horrible. So hopefully he's not, but
Yeah, you
because
guys
then
have
you have
done
less
that,
time to
right?
do all that stuff. What's that?
You guys have done a tour in van, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, everyone's crammed probably, and I think by the time you guys are about to go, there's not enough room for you to even relax. So, yeah,
The,
I
the,
also assume that. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say the cool thing about like being in a bus or something like that is, you have someone dedicated to driving and they're driving at night. So you wake up and you're in the next city most of the time with like a few hours to spare to like check things out, which is always great. If you're in a van, no one's driving through the night normally. You like get a hotel at the night and you drive the whole day. So you're driving the whole day. Then you're loading in, setting up your merch, playing your set, tearing it down, and it's like you work a 9 to 5, and then after that you work another 9 to 5.
Yeah, I get you. It's like very similar to like street, like no, I would say like, well, how do I articulate this? It's like you have your own business where you go to from town to town for a fun and fair or something like that, where you have to
Pretty
like,
much.
yeah, where you have to set up everything and then bring everything back, go to the next town, have everything off
Yeah,
again,
you're
etc.
essentially your own traveling business. Yeah, traveling
Yeah,
t-shirt
man.
salesman.
Yeah, I mean, I hope the tour for him goes well. And
Yeah,
for one thing I was really like back in, I would say 2020, was it, or 2021? You guys went out on a tour supporting Dream Theater, right?
yeah. It was 2022.
2022, my bad. I was
They
so
all
happy
blend
to see
together. It's
that.
okay. All the
Yeah,
years blend together. It's like, yeah.
I mean, who knows anything, like 2020, 2019 to 2023 are just one
we
year
we
in a
did
way.
announce it in 2021, but it got postponed. It was like originally going to be at the end of 2021, and then was
Oh, really?
beginning of 2022. Yeah,
I see. I was so happy to see that because up until that point, I was like, "Oh, dude, why aren't they getting the traction that I want them to get?" Because that time I was like super getting into like the technicalities of prog,
yeah.
and like, and I was like sold like on your guys' music as, and because it sounded very melodic too, like the heart duology, like my heart sometimes, my head sometimes, like
Uh,
that's probably like some of my favorite music across like all prog in general. It's like I was very okay, like why aren't these guys getting the traction? And then the two, I was so happy to see that,
yeah.
and I'm glad that you guys got to play with us. So like what was your guys' initial reaction when you found out that, oh, you guys are going to support Dream Theater now?
Uh, I was with Joey on the phone call when we found out, and our reaction was pretty much the same. We were basically being told, I've got a band that, you know, is someone from a label saying, I've got a band, they need an opening act. And they're like, and it's Dream Theater. And I'm like, you're lying to us. Dream Theater doesn't tour with an opening act. Gotcha, you know? But this was their first tour with an opening act in like 11 years or something like that. Like it
Yeah,
had been a
Periphery
very
was
long
the
time.
one that they did before that, right?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. So
Crazy.
yeah, we were pretty much in disbelief that that was happening. Cause it was like, it wasn't even on our bingo card. Cause you know, you're like, they don't tour with an opening act. So why would I think, oh, I want to tour with them one day, you know? But it was obviously very cool because like definitely the reason that I went to Berkeley in the first place was, you know, got in a rush, had a friend that showed me Dream Theater. And then I was like, music can do that. So I was
A
super into
full
them in
circle
high
moment.
school. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. And then
That's
same thing
lovely.
for Joey. And I'm pretty sure for Adam Bentley as well. Just like big fans all around. So
That's so cool. And even like, the thing that you guys did with Genshin Impact, like that was very cool because I feel like Genshin Impact during that time was probably one of the biggest games like in the scene.
oh yeah,
And
yeah.
you guys had like 4 songs on their anniversary.
hmm Yeah, that was
So
a
how
ton of
did that
fun.
happen?
They reached out essentially and they're like, we're looking for bands to play in our concert and we like what you do and we want you to arrange some songs. And we were like, cool.
Hell yeah.
So we did our thing with them and yeah, it was a ton of fun and I'm really happy with how they came out. I think it was like an awesome sort of addition to the concert there.
Yeah, I mean the music video was also pretty nice. I just missed you because I feel like you had COVID or something, right?
I caught COVID like 2 days
Yeah,
before that video shoot. So
sucks,
yeah,
man.
I didn't get to participate unfortunately, but I was still on the recordings and
Yeah.
helped like arrange a lot of it. So yeah, it was just a lot of fun to do.
And very recently, I would say a year ago, you guys were a part of Jacob Collier's album. So that's also
Right.
another, like, a great thing to check off, like, cool stuff we have done as a band.
Yeah,
Sort of.
he just likes us for some reason. We don't know why. So that's
What's
cool.
not to like?
Uh-huh. We like his stuff too, so it works out.
Yeah, I mean, that was super awesome to see because, like, I knew that he was going to get some of the greatest, like, Tori Kelly and people like them. But as a hard check, I
Mhm.
was like, whoa, let's go. This is some good representation for the scene. And yeah, man, I just wanted to highlight those things because I love Archeco and I just like wanted to take a moment like celebrate those moments
Yeah.
because they are actually like pretty awesome. And
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
yeah, man.
A lot of cool
Uh,
moments.
so that's for the Archeco part. Now coming back to your bass journey, do you can you like in your own way can you define like what do you think is a great bass tone, or is it subjective, like complete, like no, obviously it's subjective, but how would what do you think is a great bass tone?
I guess I'll say like what I like in a bass tone
Okay.
is like a sort of mid forward tone. And this goes for like cleans as well. Like the like Jaco Pastorius kind of clean tone. I like how those mids just pop out and really cut through. And then, for like regular distorted tones, I feel like Geddy Lee has always been an influence there. And some of his like most recent rigs, I think, have just sounded really good, where he's got this like deep, clean low end going on, but this nice, like smooth distortion going on top. Moving Pictures, that album is also just another one that I love the tone on because it's like so interesting in that like it's like very distorted and extremely mid forward, but there's like the highs really roll off at like 3K or something like that. So you're really just
Okay.
getting that sort of growl area of the bass without any of the
Yeah,
clack
the
up
grit.
top. Yeah, which I'm not like a huge fan of like the clacketiness, especially because the way I play, I guess, is like sort of smacking the strings a bit. They hit the fretboard, and I don't want to like overemphasize that sound of the string hitting the fretboard any more than I have to, but I still want it to be distorted. So that's
Yeah.
another tone that I just really like and yeah, have like tried to make on a bunch of different things.
Yeah. I mean, speaking of bass tones, one one very cool thing about you is that you have your own bass plugin, and that's awesome. So I just want to
Yeah.
understand like what were the pain points that you understood in the during that time, like when you started, like what were the current pain points at that time with the bass plugins, and which made you think that, oh, if I were to do something by myself, I could probably do something that I like, which is way more versatile.
Yeah. So I guess going back to what I mentioned about like Geddy Lee's tone is you always have that sort of clean low end and then that nice distorted high end. That's sort of like dual tone thing going on. And there's not a lot of plugins out there that'll split your tone into two or more paths at all. I can't think of any besides like Parallax from Neural DSP, which has the three.
Three, yeah.
But I don't think there's any like dual bass amp plugins that I know of. So if you want to do that, you've got to like duplicate your track in the DAW and make a low end chain on one and make a high end chain on the other, and it's like can be a lot of plugins. And I sort of experimented on my own because I love the neural stuff, especially like the guitar stuff I use all the time. But I found for bass, it becomes like the go to for a lot of people, like that Dingwall parallax sound, like everybody's running it. But
Yep.
um, going back to like what I said about I really like a mid forward tone, the parallax I found just nukes the low mids entirely. Like it kills them. It doesn't really matter where you move the sliders and where you move the crossovers. The low mids are just like permanently disappeared. So that was a thing that bothered me a bit because that's like a thing that can help your bass really fit into a mix. Those low mids are actually really important for helping to blend in with distorted guitars. Like you don't want a muddy bass, but distorting that low mid area is really important for a good sounding bass. The high mids are going to help you cut through. The low mids are going to help you blend. So yeah, what I was doing, this was probably earlier in 2023. I was working on a few sessions, and I found myself making this just really wacky chain of things. I had 2 tracks in Logic. One was just for the sub and had like 2 or 3 plugins on it. And one was just for the high end where I had like Saturn running like a multi-band distortion. And then I
Okay.
had a few like analog style EQs. I had some compressors going on and all of this junk essentially. And it like sounded okay. It was like closer to where I wanted it, but it was just too many plugins and not necessarily the right approach. So I was just sort of like, why can't I just make a plugin that does what I want to do, And obviously the biggest barrier to entry there would be because I have to code it and I don't know how to code. So that was
Yeah.
definitely one of the harder parts, was getting the basics of like, what technology do I need to make this? How do I execute it? Because I figured if I could get the sort of like skeleton that I wanted, I could fine tune little parameters uh, and get the tone that I wanted. But it was, getting that multi-band skeleton with like compression and EQ going on was not super easy. So had to
Right.
learn that. There's some great tutorials on YouTube that I had watched, and yeah, just started going with was using Juice, which is like a
Framework, yeah.
plugin framework essentially. It takes care of I thought, I didn't know how much you could have taken care of. I thought you'd have to like do a ton of stuff to have your VST version versus your AU version or whatever, but Juice just takes care of all that. You kind of just say like, I want
Export it.
distortion here. You like, if you have a distortion module, you instantiate it. You can export an AU, you can export a VST. It's like super easy. So yeah, that was very helpful in doing that. And then, yeah, I just sort of experimented for a few months until I had a distortion that worked. Because my first few times trying to make one, I I made one and then I tested it in Logic and it like clipped the DAW by like 700 dB and I was like, oops,
Yeah.
that's not right.
Yeah, I was testing one of my friend's plugins the other day. He made a he made a saturation plugin of sort, and he divided the gain by, like, or multiplied the gain by 100 twice. So every single time I would load it in Reaper, it would automatically mute the track, because I think Reaper has a system where, if you go
Yeah.
past a certain dB, it will mute your track entirely. So I was like trying to figure out, like, hey, I'm putting a limiter on that, because he wanted me to demo it and wanted to, like, send him a snippet of it. And I was like, what's happening, dude? Like, this has never happened to me. And he was like, oh, I accidentally multiplied it by 100 twice. And I was like,
Yeah.
yeah. But I
I've
don't
done that
think a lot of
before
people.
where I was just
Yeah,
saying I've
right.
done that before where like I had like, my saturation like instantiated twice, for example, like on accident, and I'm like, wow, this sounds really bad. Why? And it's like, oh, because I'm literally running it through the saturation like too many times.
Yeah, I see. But I don't think a lot of people realize, like, how hard it is actually to, like, model even like I mean, distortion, or I would say even a compression for that sort, because not only do you have to take into consideration, like, what kind of distortion do you want, like, it also has to do with, like, even for compressors, like, is it modeled after an optical compressor or something like that?
Hmm.
How is the knee gonna function, and like very subtle things, DSP things that, like, we probably know as like, producers, mix engineers, or just players, but how does that come into play? Like, that's a totally different worldview that we have
Definitely.
to learn. Yeah, and I mean, I'm sure it must have been like, a lot of things would have been like, oh, this is how it works. Oh, like, with equations and stuff, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Which I had no idea how you make distortion in the digital realm before I started this. I bought a book that basically talks about the basics of like, here's how these
DSP.
algorithms work and stuff like that. Yeah. The DSP. And I want to be like, I'm not like modeling. I don't want to claim that I'm modeling a distortion because I didn't model anything in, in my plugin. I wanted it to sound kind of like my Sans amps, but I wouldn't say I went through and got all the circuits and there's none
Yeah,
of that going on. But my
inspired by, right?
yeah, exactly. But I wanted something flexible, and that essentially was my philosophy. Was like like I mentioned before, you want your low end to be solid and clean and like maybe compressed so there's not like certain notes jumping out of you. You want that low end to stay stable in your mix, especially if you're mixing metal. That's sort of like the other half of this whole thing is I did a lot of mix engineering work. So, I knew what I wanted bass to do in a mix. I knew what I wanted my own bass to sound like. So I had all of that to sort of work with as I fine tune this. And I would like load in Arch Echo stems with like my bass DI and just test the plugin on it. And like, I just wanted it to like blend easily. And yeah, so that was like the sort of formula I ended up with was the 4-band formula, which was the low end to be clean and pinned, the low mids to blend in with your guitars or to cut if you want to cut them, but they're there as an option. The high mids to cut through, and then the I'm not a super fan of like the very high presence clacky stuff, but it's
Right.
there. So that's sort of its own option. I can turn that down and not have it be too present. But if you like that sound, you can crank it and have more of that high end going on as well.
Yeah. That's I mean, I'm so glad that you already had an idea of what you wanted. And I mean, for all sorts of programming purposes, if there's an clear intention, it gets a little more narrowed, rather than, us trying to find out, like, hey, let me figure out how to make a plugin. Like, that's such a vast concept, but
Uh huh.
you narrowed it down to, like, you wanted it to have a certain way. You probably had your signal chain of, like, how you wanted certain things to react, or how you wanted certain things to work in your
Yeah.
uh, and so I'm glad that you did that, because already, like, with object oriented programming in C++, it's quite a, like, learning curve. I mean, I am Python coded. Like,
Yeah.
I still can't do object oriented very well. So like, like, you're someone like yourself who I assume you had no programming background. You
Hmm.
came into this having to learn object oriented programming, and then even the juice is awesome. It has its own headache about, you have to instantiate the files inside the producer, as well as, like, where you actually have it stored in your computer, and
Hmm.
and and a few other things like that. But Yeah, and I'm like, it's really inspiring to see, like, you took matters into your own hands and made a plugin that you wanted. I think what few of my bass friends have tried out your plugins, and they speak really highly of it. And I
Nice.
was doing some research yesterday, and like, it's really really awesome of, like, for the latest version, even for the light version, the amount of, like, things that you offer in a plugin, it's massive, and especially at an affordable rate. That's
Yeah,
that's really cool. I assume you were a one man guy behind this, or did you have
it was
some
just
sort of
me. Yeah, it was just me. So a lot to
respect?
learn there. Like, making things that are code essentially. There was a lot of like having to figure out, because I would send the demos to Adam Bentley. I want to see what he thinks of it. And he's like, I can't get my computer to run it. So I'm like, cool, I have to figure out code signing, I guess, and to make it so
Yeah,
that when he loads it onto his Mac, it doesn't like immediately flag it as malware. And it's like, okay, this is a real thing that you can run at your own risk or something. But yeah, figuring that out. I think at first too, uh, I had not demoed it in stereo at all because I was always just playing bass through it. But Adam's using VSTs, which are running in contact and usually outputting stereo. So my plugin was just not ready to receive stereo input. So like the right side would be like really garbly or something, and then all the like actual sound would be on the left. And he's like, "It's really weird. I don't know why the right's not working." And I was like, "Oh, that's because I didn't code it for stereo. So I gotta, you know,
I
go
see.
fix that and make sure it knows to process both sides if it is stereo." So, yeah, just so many little things I had to learn along the way that,
Yeah.
aside from just coding the plugin.
Yeah, I mean, what you said about your DAW recognizing the VST as a malware, that's like a common problem, and
Yeah.
so I specifically downloaded Reaper just to test out certain plugins that that I was a part of, or like a few of my friends who build their own plugins wanted to say, because Reaper, I think since it's open source, it allows the freedom of, like, that. But if the same VST is being scanned, it just Ableton, or I would say Pro Tools or Logic, would just not scan it until it's ready.
Mhm.
So yeah, that's, and another I think is like when you name a preset, and then you select that preset, and then you close the plugin and open the plugin again, preset's gone. Now you're back to, like, your default settings. That's also one of the
Yeah.
problem
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
happens all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. That like, I think luckily I found a tutorial that explained how to make it so that, if you open your plugin back up, it'll at least remember your settings, which is great. But like the preset manager that I made, that honestly took more time than the actual four band plugin itself. Just making
Really?
it so that you could save a preset and load a preset, and then like for a while, there's a box that would show your preset name. But on like the first version, I just could not figure out how to make it so that when you open the plugin back up, it would keep the preset name that you loaded last, even though it would know your settings in the plugin, so it like functionally still worked. It would just forget the text at the top. A few months later I had figured that out and like put out an update, but it's just like, yeah, just so many little things to have to worry about there. And then especially with Macs, like making stuff for Mac OS, uh, the OS is really specific about where it wants to let a plugin write files. So like to
Okay.
save a preset, I had to like find like the exact folder that it would let this plugin write a preset file essentially, which was like uh, somewhere in like the user library, I think was like an okay place. But I tried doing it in other locations and it would just not write the file. And I'm pretty sure it's just because, probably for good reason, the OS doesn't want applications writing files to just anywhere on your hard drive. So
Yeah.
makes sense, but just a thing I had to figure out, like where it was going to let me do that.
Yeah, man. I mean, if you had to, uh make another plugin, let's just say, not for bass but something else, like, what are the things, like, that you would definitely take into consideration, which you think will help you, like, fast track your plugin creation process this time around, if you were to start?
Well, I think the thing that's fun about this is once you figure out a lot of stuff once, you can kind of reuse it. Like now that I have a preset manager that works, I can use most of that in a future plugin if I want to, and it'll work the same way. So there's in a way, it's great that some of that stuff is like figured out. But I've always like been wondering about future plugins. I like doing the bass stuff. I feel like signature bass amps from other artists could be a cool way to go. But yeah, or like doing a guitar amp at some point. That's a really hard one because there's like, the neural stuff on guitar is just so good. So it's like
Yeah,
hard to make something that can stand up there, but could try
totally.
stuff out and like see where people think it falls short. And yeah.
Yeah. I think you should check out Keith Bloomer. He made his own, DIY kit so that you can model your amps, pedals, even VSC softwares for your own usage. So what you just have to do is like you have to have 5 tracks, and like I would assume, like, let's just say if it's a dark glass pedal, so the main knob will be the gain knob, or how much, like, it's quite narrow in the way, like you cannot tweak more settings, rather than just like how the entire pedal works on an overall level. So
Hmm.
you just record it, like, with different levels of input, like 0% input, 25%, like, pedal being active, 50%, 75%, 100%. And then you just take that into a Google Colab, which is like a online framework for running machine learning models, and he has like a whole pipeline ready. So you just upload that and select what you want to do with it, and then it will give you a plugin out, like not a JSON file out. So what that JSON file does, the JSON file has weights or some sort of information that you can load into a VST plugin, and the plugin is called Proteus Pedal.
Uh-huh.
And you just have to load that JSON file, and the JSON file will act as if, like, it's a modeled pedal. So you
Oh,
can make
wow.
your
That's
own.
crazy.
Yeah, yeah. And another thing is that you can edit the Proteus pedals code so that you can use it in your own VSCs. Uh,
Wow. I might have to do this thing. So I've got a few pedals I'd like to model if I knew any more about it. Like I've got
I'm
the
happy to help
Sans
you. Like,
amp and yeah.
even like if you wanted to go a step further, and so there's this another thing called RT Neural, and it's like I would say a wrapper class that takes your
Uh-huh.
Python code and converts it into a C++ object, so
Oh,
that you can
cool.
use it in your, let's just say if you wanted, like, a knob in quad base that does exactly the same thing as dark glass, you could probably do that with that.
Wow. That's crazy. Yeah. I had no idea that this stuff had taken off so hard on the plugin front, but that's awesome.
Yeah, and technology.
Yeah. It's moving fast.
Absolutely. So yeah, man, I'm really, like, happy to have like understood about your journey as a coder into like a VSC developer. And
Uh
so having this experience now, like, what do you think about this side of the music industry? Like your 2 cents on, like, from your experience.
you mean like the like plugin side of the music industry?
Yeah, the plugin side,
Uh-huh.
like, having a company that sells software services, sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean it's interesting. It's still hard just like the regular music industry, I guess. There's still a lot to it. Like being a one man crew is, you're making this plugin, figuring out everything that's wrong with it. And, I had beta tested it with some people to hear like some other issues that I had not foreseen, but a lot of that beta testing was just me as well, like over a bunch of hours. And, after you're done with all that, you've got to like make YouTube content for it and like stuff for your Instagram and all that and try and keep it relevant over time. So I think one of the hardest aspects has just sort of been, uh, making the plugin itself was like pretty hard getting it out there. But then it's like, now how do you stay relevant like a year later? Because a lot of these other companies, they've got their product pipelines written out years in advance. You know, they know exactly what they're doing, what they're trying to do, and there's always like something new coming out, trying to get people to hop on. So yeah, it's just, I guess, a little hard exploring like that area and just trying to, you know, stay relevant. But I don't want to just like put stuff out there just for attention or like just hoping people will buy it. Like I want it to be like really interesting and new. So that's sort of where I'm at with things. I don't want to rush like product releases just because I'm like, I need to have something for this quarter, you know, because there's no shareholders bugging me or anything. So
Yeah, I see. And one other like important thing that I've learned is that user experience is like, the key or the backbone. So if even if you have like the most solid plugin, but people can't understand how to use it,
right,
then
yeah,
yeah,
it's got to be simple. Yeah,
absolutely. Um, so yeah, man, that's great to hear, and I'm very excited for what you do next with, like the other libraries that you write or release in the future. Very
yeah.
excited
Thank you.
to see that, and um, I just like I think as a parting note, I would say, like, what's next for you? What's next for Archeco? And where do you think the prog scene is heading in general? In what direction?
Yeah. What's next for me? Great question. So actually, one of the reasons I got into plugin design in the first place was like, one, because I had this tone in my head that I wanted to get on software that I couldn't get anywhere. But at the same time, I was like, I really wanted to get into the video game audio side of things. And, for like sound design or music implementation, there's coding involved a lot of the time too. So, and I didn't know any of that. So I really wanted to expand what I knew there to sort of chase that area. So, in the future, I would still love to do like, more work in the game audio scene. I think that'd be a lot of fun. Love the music, would love to just like compose for stuff like that. But in the meantime, with Arch Echo, so the question was future for me, Arch Echo, and then what was the third one?
Like, where do you think the prog scene is heading? In
Oh,
what
and the prog
direction?
scene.
As far
Yeah.
as
So
stylistic,
yeah.
is
So
concerned.
yeah. So the future for Arch Echo, at least, is we've written more stuff. We're going to be releasing more stuff, playing some places this year, which will be nice. We didn't do any performances last year. So there's an unannounced tour currently that we like just accepted. So that'll be happening soon, which is great. And then, yeah, some other plans for throughout the year. Hopefully some new music releases happening too. And then hopefully we'll just keep keeping on with new music and performing, and yeah, some hopefully cool other tours. And then the prog scene. That's a really good question because yeah, it's like, my brain is kind of like 2019 was last year, right? So it wasn't. So there's just been so much that's happened. I don't know if this exactly answers your question, but I'm going to go there anyway. I had a friend show me the Suno music making app. I don't know if you've tried that, but
Yeah.
he had typed in progressive instrumental metal, and it had it didn't make a great song, but it had very clearly scraped what I thought was like Stella off the internet, like
No
specifically,
way.
like just the fact that like it had a similar rhythm, it had keyboard solos, which like instrumental prog, does not mean keyboard solos, right? Like sure, Arch Echo has it, Dream Theater has it. But
Yeah.
like if
Do
you
sell.
look
Yeah.
at a lot of instrumental prog, there's no keyboards. There's no keyboards in Animals or or at least solos and intervals, Plini, stuff like that. So to me, I was like, okay, so you literally scraped Stella and put it into your
Dude.
algorithm here. So uh, I think the future of music might be a weird one because, like, yeah, AI can't make good prog metal currently. It might be able to in a few years. Like it can make like pop songs pretty well, I feel like. And I've even read there's like this whole thing with Spotify, and they've had like ghostwriters in the past writing the tracks that they put on their own playlists so that they don't have to pay the royalties on it. And they're also just heavily leveraged in AI. So it's like, at one point, are they going to load this platform up with just like AI music that they don't have to pay royalties on and all that? Or similarly, other people have just taken the popular songs off Suno. Like there's a guy named Ben Jordan that did a really good video recently where people are just taking this Suno AI music and then making a fake artist like and verifying it on Spotify and like uploading it to their distributor, and it's on Apple Music and Spotify and all that stuff.
That sucks, man. That
So
sucks.
yeah, there's people trying to game the system there, but it brings me all back to the point that even with all that happening, even if like AI stuff improves in the next few years and the music is like better or whatever, uh, you can't see an AI band perform live, right?
Yep.
Like you're not going to see an AI band on stage. These people making their fake artists with using Suno to pump out the music, they're not going to play anywhere. So I think like this year in particular, more than others, is like really changed my focus on live music, where I think you might see the industry really refocus on live music, where it's still extremely hard to make it touring and playing and all that stuff. But I think as if the AI stuff does become sort of more proliferated in the music scene, you'll probably also see like an increased hunger of people who want to see real humans who are
Yes.
talented playing real stuff, So,
Yeah.
uh, yeah, I think live performance will be big going into stuff. But yeah, as far as the progressive music, uh, it's a fun one
What
because
would
it's
you like to
always
see more
changing, I
from
guess.
people?
What would I like to see? I mean, me particularly, I like vibes in music. So, sort of ambient kind of stuff, or like, I'm like a big fan of M83. So anyone who combines that sort of like post rock or something like that with their prog metal is always fun. But that's not necessarily like super complicated or technical to do. But yeah, it'll just be interesting to see how the industry changes and stuff. And it's always cool to see what bands have like really popped off over the last few years that you know didn't exist when we'd started. Like Sleep Token, for example, has just like blown up in recent years, and like I don't think they were around in 2017, or at least I never heard of them. So
Yeah, their first record was in 2019.
yeah, so
Yeah.
just new stuff like that, and they're like kind of just like a pop band that has like gent breakdown. So pretty unique in that respect. And people seem to love it. So yeah, you never know where things are going to turn, whether more notes are going to be cooler in the next 10 years, or if people are going to want less notes. I have no idea, but we'll just see, I
Yeah.
guess.
Yeah, I'm really stoked anyway on what you guys released this year. Like I'm very excited, like when you mentioned that Joey started a song with a bass synth, like which you guys probably never used. Like that's already like
Uh,
you guys heading into direction where you guys are trying out new things. And I just love,
yeah.
like because it's really easy for like bands after having their own solid sound to be complacent, or
Mm,
like just have a formula for, like there's this one concept called, even in sitcoms, where after a few seasons the characters start becoming their own archetypes of, like
right. Yeah. They become
yeah.
like
So
caricatures of themselves. Yeah.
exactly.
I've
And
definitely noticed that.
yeah, with bands too, like it happens a lot. But yeah, I mean, that's one thing I always love about progressive music is, like it's the feeling always comes first, and like the most ridiculous ideas work in our genre that
Uh,
probably would be like discarded in like more rigid genres, but it
yeah.
works here, and that's awesome. So yeah,
Yeah.
man, I those were some great insights. Like overall, I loved talking to you about all things programming and even bass in general. I personally learned a
Mhm.
lot today as well. Do you have
Awesome.
anything to say as like a parting note to anybody who watches this? Any sort of advice, any sort of things that you wanted to say, and you think like people should know about or people should take into consideration while making music in general? Anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, make like what you want. You know, make what your heart wants. Don't think that you have to make something a certain way just because it's what's popular or something like that. I think that's sort of the biggest thing that came out of our first album was I don't know if there was anything really like it at the time that I could have listened to. Like the closest I can think of is there was a band called Frost that had a at the time they only had like one album or two albums, but like early to or mid 2000s, where it was like this really unique sort of progressive fusion kind of thing happening with like pop production going on. Uh, but yeah, I mean, like you just never know what sort of sounds are going to come together and be cool. So just like follow your heart, make something unique, and don't worry about the likes on Instagram or anything either, because those don't really mean anything at this point. Like that's a whole other story of just like how the platform has sort of devolved into just memes versus like actually helping promote your music and stuff like that. So,
Yeah.
but write what you want, be a cool person, be, just you always want to be one of those people that you meet someone and they're like, oh yeah, that guy was cool, because you never know who's going to call you for a gig or something someday, or they might need a bass player or a drummer, and they're like, well, that guy was cool that I met like a year ago or something. He could play, so that stuff goes a long way too.
Hell yeah, man. That's awesome. Thank you once again for coming on the podcast. It was lovely chatting.
Yeah, it was a great time. Thanks for having me.